Hello everybody, today we're going to be taking a look at chapter 4 of On Being in Essence by St. Thomas Aquinas. This chapter is named How Essences Exist in Separated Substances. Matter and mind. So, at the time of writing this, there was a debate about whether there was this thing called spiritual matter. So we've got these physical things, and these physical things definitely have matter. Matter is this kind of substrate which is capable of existing or persisting through a corruption of something. And it also accounts for the potentiality that a thing has, its passive potency. So there was this debate about whether mind had some kind of matter, whether it had some kind of, non-corporeal matter. The idea that it did have matter is something that Aquinas believes came from a Muslim named Avicebron. I'm not going to pretend to say that. But Aquinas takes great exception to this, and he gives an argument. Forms are only intelligible when separated from matter. Forms are made intelligible by the intellect, so the intellect must be something which is separated from matter. And then he has a significantly more interesting argument in favor of the idea that there is no incorporeal matter. So to be corporeal, there's like this form of like physicality or physicalness, right? And then there's matter. So if there's incorporeal matter, then there is that matter plus the form of corporeity or corporealness. And when you put these two together, you get physical matter. However, minds are capable of understanding forms. And what happens when the mind understands something is it takes the form and it removes it from matter. And the problem is that if you take the form of physicalness and you put it into mental matter, then that mental matter becomes physical matter. That's what it is to be physical matter. So when you take the form of corporeity or physicalness and you put it into spiritual matter, the spiritual matter is no longer spiritual matter. It becomes physical matter. So in this way, it would be impossible to have spiritual matter which received forms that that were related to physicalness or corporeity, because they would just become that thing. Form and existence. Some things don't have matter. The intellect, the angels, and God. Without matter, things are still composed of form and existence. They're still the kind of thing they are, and the fact that they exist, Then Aquinas gives an argument for the ability of form to exist without matter. So whenever X could be the cause of Y, then X can exist without Y, but Y cannot exist without X. Form gives existence to matter, therefore form can exist without matter. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, Okay. Then composite versus simple substances or essences. So a composite essence in this definition is something which has two essential parts. One of them is form, one of them is matter. Every kind of object with essential parts, on Aquinas' view, is going to have form and matter. And then there are some objects which are simply form. These will be intellects, angels, and God. So there are some differences here that Aquinas separates out. First, it is possible for someone to designate part of the essence of a composite being when talking or using the essence as a name, which is impossible with the case of something which is simply form. And then the thing which is physical, which has form and matter, is capable of multiplication because designated matter is what allows for the multiplication of any kind of substance, whereas simply spiritual substances, things that are pure form, are not capable of multiplication because they don't have designated matter to be related to. Then Aquinas notes that even in some simple forms or some simple objects, There are kinds of complexity. So in spiritual substances, there is a composite of essence and existence. And there's also composition of act and potency because spiritual substances are capable of change, they're just not capable of corruption the way that material things are. Then we have this argument for the distinction between essence and existence. Whatever is not in the concept of the essence or the quiddity comes from outside the essence and makes a composition with it. But every essence or quiddity can be understood without understanding anything about its existence. For example, you could understand the idea of a phoenix or a unicorn without knowing whether they actually exist, the same way with a Tyrannosaurus rex. Therefore, it is clear that existence is something other than the essence or the quiddity. And then there's one exception to this, which is God. In God, essence and existence are identical. They are non-composite in this sense. And then there's an argument for, if this is the case, then there's only one God, for any simple being will have an essence identical to their existence. There can be no difference between their existences. So there can be no difference between their essences, which means that if all of these things are the same, then they will simply just be the same being. And then immaterial form is always intellectual. And because God isn't material, because if he was material, he would be composite, and he's not composite. So because God is immaterial, he is also intellectual. Existence in creatures. Now, existence is either from a thing's nature or from another. It can't come from a thing's nature, for the nature as distinct from existence would have to cause the existence, which in turn causes it. So you couldn't have like this circle of causes between the existence and the essence, which would happen if there was existence that came from a composite being that had existence of itself. So it has to come from another. There can't be an infinity of others or other causes in this situation, so there has to be a first member, which requires no cause. Aquinas will not be substantiating that there can't be an infinite of others. That's something that he does elsewhere. I hope you learned something.